and welcome to Ellensburg, Washington, USA. This is a live look in the auditorium in Discovery Hall on the campus of Central Washington University. And you're like, I don't see anything. All I see is the slide. Okay, that's a fair point. You're looking at the slide. Our talk today is GNSS-enhanced earthquake and tsunami early warning. The talk will be given by one of our own, Tim Melbourne, Central Washington University, and you can see all of the colleagues, Walter Zaliga, Marcelo Santajan, Craig Scrivener, Rex Flake, all those folks work on the third floor, a little closer to heaven, on the third floor of Discovery Hall, and grad students, Jesse, Catherine, and Ben as well. Okay, so thank you for joining us. Looks like we are loud and clear. Thank you for the report. Let me give you a look at the what? A look at the familiar corner of the room. Let me get on camera and talk to a few of you. Hi, everybody. Are we loud and clear with the mic here? Still getting used to these new mics. It's nice to see you today. Thank you for joining us live. We have more than 150, and more will trickle in. I'll give you a shot of the room in just a second, but I want to connect with you eyeball to eyeball. And it's 11:47 a.m. Pacific time, and our talk today will start a little bit after noon. So I'll put a bookmark after the fact when our speaker begins speaking. So if you're seeing this in replay and you don't want to sit through this first 15 minutes, I understand. Okay? I'm realizing right now I need to hold this mic. Well, no way, I'll do this. Where are you viewing from today? Can I say hi to a number of you before I turn you around and show you the room? Tri-Cities, Washington. Zentner from United Kingdom. John, the Youper, the only Youper here from Menominee, Michigan. Condesi is in London, UK. Sorry, Hackney, London, UK. Is that a neighborhood, Hackney? A suburb, maybe? Riverton, Illinois. Dayton, Ohio. Bring up the audio level on that mic. Well, Elaine. Red Deer, Alberta. I'm still not super pleased with these mics, I have to say. They're a step in the right direction, but there's room for improvement. Sunlight Waters, Dayton, Ohio. Windy, Wales, Swansea. Philomath, Oregon. Hello, Kirk. Marysville, Washington. Nice shirt, Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you. It's new from LL Bean. This episode brought to you by LL Bean in the big blue box. What? You're all talking about the mic. This is the mic I have. This is the mic that's working today. That's all we have. Sorry. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's been 3 months since we've done this, man. I'm happy that we're even functional. Vinman's Bakery on Lower Craigs Hill. Good morning, Jeff. Ottawa, Canada. It's not aimed in the wrong direction. Okay. I didn't sleep a lot last night, so I'm a little edgy, so I'm going to get off camera, okay? All right, thanks for joining us. Let me turn you around and let you enjoy the room. Thanks. Hannah Shamlou, work in the room. Jordan Carey, work in the room. I want you to notice we have two professors who are always facing the room and interacting, cultivating relationships that we have here.
I'm supposed to tell you hi from Abby Crow.
That's nice. Thank you, Ed. Skagit Ed is here. Rachel is here. Pat the pilot is here. The Sorensens are here. You are welcome to come anytime we have a noon talk. Can I ask one more time? Are we 5 by 5? I haven't turned the room microphone on yet, but I'm going to stand way over here and see if we're still working. Five by 5 over here. Loud and clear over here.
Looking good, Nick.
Okay, oh, wow, look at that. Fancy purple pen routine.
You can't miss the stream, you know. Even if you're here in person.
That's right. Yeah, for once, the professor's not going to yell at you for being on your phone because you're watching the program.
About 10-second delay, though.
Is it? Yeah. Oh, audio.
Hey, there we go.
Is it because
In the U.S. or in Canada?
They have several positions pretty much everywhere.
That's like dropping a bomb and then just leaving.
But
We just got crop dusted.
Rangefront was good because
They're Canadian.
they specialize specifically in entry-level geologists and
What is that?
Oh, Nick, you're not so bright sometimes. Hey, John. Excuse me. Are you guys doing a research project with Hannah Shamloo?
We're helping her get her lab set up for right now. We are, yes. Trying to get the oven cooking.
gonna make some rocks?
The magma chamber.
And you both transferred here to this university just a few months ago, and yet you're working with Hannah 3 months later.
Hand chosen.
Oh, okay. Good. Look right into that camera. Hand chosen. Very good. Very good. Okay. I'm going to put this on. You're going to keep your coat on during the talk?
I've been cold.
Okay. That's fine if you want to keep it on.
Put it here.
Sure.
Okay,
I might go a little closer, though, to your...
Okay.
So, would you mind if we go something like this?
No?
Okay, right in
Tell me
there.
what works. Then I can take it off later.
Either way, yeah.
Yeah.
So, let's let me get my iPad.
You want me to go down there?
So, viewers, we're testing Tim's mic, and I'm going to stand over here, Tim, so you yell at me a little bit. So, you've been cold lately. Tell me about
Testing.
that.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Is it the walk? Is it the walk that,
too
that
cold?
cools
This
you
building's
off?
too cold.
The building's too
My
cold.
building is too cold.
I thought
My
heat
side of the
rose.
building
I
is
thought
too
the hot
cold.
air goes up to you guys.
Ah, it's cold.
Okay.
How's that? Is it
Sure,
working?
Southern California. There's a little delay in the comments. Oh, Tim's audio is 5 by 5, which means loud and clear.
Good.
Very good. Okay, we're just going to keep that right on you, just like that. So,
All right.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you, everybody. Very good. Well, it's Tim's sound that's more important than mine. Well, you see Chris Mattinson there in the black vest. John. Thank you.
Don't worry about it.
Okay,
I watched yesterday.
good. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
I'll stick with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what your responses are.
Mostly what you just said.
Yeah.
So that's all I need. I'll stick with it.
Okay.
Yep. Thanks. John Nash, you're the other John. Yeah, we got Gary's galore, John's galore. Okay, I think we're about ready. I'm going to go turn on that big black box over by Dr. Bree McGinnis, see if that can work. Give you a shot of
This is
that.
a hot mic. So, all is well. The YouTubing of it is an interesting thing because get the whole internet out there.
It's kind of intimidating.
A little more.
Especially with the comment section.
Do people tend to be fairly
Announcing about the paperwork,
positive?
clearance, cameras. I'm announcing that they should check in with you, even though you're not the 504
This week,
instructor.
and then every other week they would check in with him.
Tim. Okay. Great.
No,
Thank you.
that's great. And what's a typical online audience? In real time?
Testing.
Later. You know.
Davey, can you hear this through the microphone? Davey, can you hear me? Davey, I'm going to play with the knobs
Yeah, I
here.
mean, it was interesting.
Davey?
It was like I was talking about like the Kaikoura
Davey,
earthquake, and I'm like,
too much.
do I really know that
Right in
story?
here.
Because if I get it wrong,
Pretty touchy.
I'm going to hear about it from people in New Zealand.
I'm being amplified right now. That's good. I'm going to come a little bit more. Right there, that's too much. 20. Okay. Very good. Check.
Is he here?
No, she's here.
Is the president here? Listening from his kitchen, probably. His wife is a geomorphologist, is that right?
She was a geology teacher. I don't know what her specialty is.
Okay.
She was a geology instructor.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for being here. It's been almost 3 months since we've done this. That's a long time, and yet here we are. So I appreciate you remembering to come. Rachel saw the chalkboards. That prompted her to come down. All sorts of folks. We've got people visiting from out of town as well. So everybody's welcome here, and we are good. I have a few announcements before we begin. Thank you, Audrey. We will try this. This is a little touchy. This is our new black box. There, but we're touching feedback a little bit. Oh, maybe it's just me being too close. Is that it? Oh, we'll keep it right there and hopefully, is that better, Audrey? Okay, thank you. All right. So since it's been a few months since we've done this, let me remind you of a couple of things. One, thanks for Hannah and her assistants setting up the food and drink. That starts at 11:30, and you're encouraged, if you don't have class, to just, even if you do have class, come down here at 11:30 and just hang out. This is a social thing. We don't get together that much. And I know you have a full life and all of that, but like, I don't know if you need to totally rush out of here at the end of the talk. Like, we're literally all here. Why wouldn't we just hang around for a while? But now I'm forcing you to do things, and that's awkward, so I will get off of that. Okay, so thank you. We are going to be doing this 5 of the next 6 Fridays. So we'll be in a nice flow, and whether you're required to be here for Geology 304, 504, or whether you just want to be here, or whether you're required but not in 304, whatever, we'll be in the zone. So let me do that very quickly. We will introduce our speaker momentarily. Next Friday, Chris Mattinson giving a talk, Continental Growth, Hazards and Critical Mineral Resources, the Metamorphic Connection. That's Chris next week. 2 weeks from today, an alum of our program, Sean Scott, will be driving up from Tri-Cities, Nuclear Forensics at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. And Sean will have some internship opportunities for many of you students. So if that appeals to you, that's February 7th, 2 weeks from today. Then we take February 14th off because we are all lovers and we take love very seriously. That's a 3-day weekend, all right? And the following Friday, we're back. Dr. Ann Egger giving a science education talk on February 21st, and then finally Paul Winbury on February 28th giving an Antarctic talk, geophysics. We'll talk more about those talks as we get along. So looking forward to each of those talks. Bree McGinnis is standing in the back, and she says if you have not seen her for paperwork involving the cameras, they're back in the corner. So if you've already done this last quarter, you don't have to do it again. But if you have not signed a form saying, yes, it's okay for me to be on camera, projecting onto YouTube. We're going YouTube live right now if you're unaware of that. Or if you want to stay off camera and you never want to be seen on camera, you stay over there in the shadow zone, and I promise you will not be on camera. Even those folks need to be signing a form. So everybody's signing a form. If you don't know what we're talking about, see Bree on the way out and we'll do that. Finally, Bree has a clipboard because she's pretending to be Tim Melbourne right now. Tim Melbourne normally is teaching 304, 504, and you check in with Tim most Fridays if you're in 304 or 504. But this week, and this week only, you see Bree because the instructor is too busy to talk to you. He's got more important things to do, which is actually presenting today's program. Okay? So see Bree if you're in 304 or 504 this week only. I pause because I'm wondering if I should say anything else. I guess not. Anybody got anything to say? Any announcements? Any good news? Anything you want to say? Very good. Okay, so our speaker today grew up in Southern California. He's trained in seismology, geophysics, Caltech, the California Institute of Technology in Pasadena, and he came up here to Ellensburg more than 25 years ago, and he's still here. He teaches courses. He runs PANGA up on the 3rd floor, the Pacific Northwest Geodetic Array, among many other things. Please help me welcome from the 3rd floor, making a rare appearance on the 1st floor, Tim Melbourne.
Well, thank you for that, Nick. It's lovely to be here giving a talk again. I think it's been about 10 years since I gave a department talk, so I was feeling kind of like a slacker about it. So here I am. Okay, well, I'm going to talk today about something called GNSS-enhanced earthquake and tsunami early warning, and I will unpack what that means in a little bit. But I want to say from the get-go, this is a group effort. We've been at this for pushing 20 years, trying to build essentially a global seismic network built out of where the sensor is GPS. Okay. Or today GNSS system. So I just want to emphasize that because I thought when I got here 25 years ago, I thought I knew a lot about computers, and boy, I do not think that anymore because the systems that this team has built are really quite extraordinary. So Walter Saliga, where are you, Walter? Walter, you all know Walter.
Walter, yeah.
Marcelo, some of you who don't come up to the 3rd floor, turn right at the top of the stairs and go through the little panging doors. You might not know. Marcelo, are you here? Where is Marcelo? Raise your hand. There's Marcelo, right? Craig, if you've struggled with computers and you needed help, it's Craig. And then Rex, is Rex Flake here? Yeah, there's Rex. He keeps the whole Panga network alive, and I'll explain how all that works. And what I want to show you on the background here, I didn't choose this picture mildly. This is the surface rupture of the 2019 Ridgecrest, California earthquake. And what we're trying to do globally is capture that offset as it happens. And with the incredible proliferation of GNSS, it's increasingly becoming a possibility. Oh, and let me go back. I also need to, CWU has funded a lot of this, and so I need to thank CWU. NASA has funded a lot of the tech development. The USGS, through their Earthquake Hazards Program, funds the operation of the Panga network, as well as a bunch of algorithm development through Shake Alert. And NSF funds all the operations, a lot of the stations. And so this is kind of the background government systems doing their thing, and none of this is possible without those organizations. Okay, so just as a brief outline for this talk, I want to give you guys some context and some background about where this comes from. And by the way, this is the tsunami hitting the Miyake region following the 2011 Tohoku earthquake, okay? And if you look back over the last 100 years of instrumental recordings, about 80% of bad tsunamis that kill people have been excited by earthquakes. So earthquake early warning and tsunami early warning are very much wrapped up with one another, okay? So I'll give you some background, and then I'm going to explain what Shake Alert is. Shake Alert is the United States Earthquake Early Warning Program. Its current footprint is California, Oregon, and Washington, and it sounds like there are incipient plans to expand it to the more densely populated regions of Alaska, depending on the whims of congressional funding. I'll talk a little bit about the system that we collectively have put together here at CWU. It is unique in the world as far as I can tell. We go to a lot of meetings and talk to a lot of groups, and I don't think there's any place that's doing what we're doing. And then I want to talk about something called G2s, the GNSS-enhanced Tsunami Early Warning project that we're involved with, and that's very cutting edge, and there's some reasons to that. But I wanted to start this talk close to home, because when you wake up in the morning and you read the newspaper and you hear about some overseas catastrophe, like a lot of people died in Papua New Guinea caused by a terrible faulting event in Vanuatu, you can kind of think this is somebody else's problem. This is not somebody else's problem. This is Washington State's problem. And I want to summarize real quickly a project in which I was very tangentially involved with, where NASA actually redirected what we were supposed to do. And it was to develop a tsunami loss estimation framework and the target places was Ocean Shores, Washington. So what is this? So earthquakes happen, they excite a tsunami. Tsunami comes on land, causes a lot of damage, kills a lot of people. How do you estimate something like this, right? And so we have to develop a framework. And so we did this, and I say we collectively. It was really led by a company down in Long Beach, California called ImageCat, and a guy named Ron Iguchi, but some colleagues of mine were involved. Anyway, so what we did collectively, and again, my role in this was very tangential, but I said 80% of tsunamis are caused by earthquakes, and off the coast of Washington, we know we have a bad earthquake problem out there, right? We have the Cascadia subduction zone. So you have to have a source, and so one of the algorithms that was used was my colleague down at University of Oregon, Diego Melgar, has published a lot of results where you generate earthquakes with known statistical properties of the fault. I gotta figure out this arrow. And you can change this. So you can run thousands of these types of models. And from those types, so you specify an earthquake. In this case, this is about a magnitude 9 earthquake. And then for each one of those earthquakes, you can generate an inundation map, right? You excite, and we do this in this department. Like Bree McInnes and her students do this a lot. We're good at it. Diego's group is good at it down at University of Oregon. And you can, for a place like Ocean Shores, you can generate the inundation. Okay, and if you then combine that inundation with, where people live, because you have census information, and you can compute the inundation, the hazard that comes with that for thousands of distant earthquakes, then you can start to get a statistical estimation on who might live, who might die, which houses get carried away, which houses survive. Okay, and so you take that arrival time caused by the earthquake, which excited a wave, and bring it on land. And then you can also, on the right-hand side of the screen, is how long it takes people at different paces to get off the Ocean Shores Peninsula. And when you do all that, you can come up with some estimates. And so this was this framework. And what I really wanted to point out was, for just Ocean Shores, Washington, the estimated exposure for a magnitude 9 earthquake off the coast of Washington is whatever that says, just over $7 billion. That's just Ocean Shores, Washington, based on knowing where people live, knowing what buildings are there, a statistical estimation of what kind of faulting you're going to get, and doing the inundation calculation, all right? More shocking than even a $7 billion loss for one town in Washington, and remember, there's 24 of these towns up and down the coast of just Washington, is you look at the casualties. And in this framework estimation that was developed for Ocean Shores, Washington, we broke the population down into basically 3 groups. Slow walkers, like retirees, normal walkers, like you and me, and very fast walkers, like marathon runners, right? And what you find is when you do the numbers here, there's 7,000, roughly 7,200 people in Ocean Shores, whether you're a slow walker or you're a marathon runner, only changes the number of casualties by 500. So basically, most people don't get off for a statistically normal thing, all right? So, and you don't need, I mean, we do this because you want to have numbers, but all you got to do is put on your geologist hat and look at Ocean Shores, Washington, right? And look at its low level and know that, imagine those breakers there are not little wave-driven breakers. That's a 70-foot wall of water. You know what exactly is going to happen. And there's just no time to get off, okay? So I just wanted to point this out because this is our problem too. And as Nick mentioned, I'm from Altadena, California, so if you've been reading the news, right, it's the nature of these hazards. I grew up in the chaparral. You pray it doesn't come for you. But in this world, like Ocean Shores, like Papua New Guinea, like Japan, tsunamis will happen. So just to bring it home, I wanted to make sure this isn't an abstraction. Okay, so what is GNSS? GNSS stands for Global Navigational Satellite Systems. You've all heard of the GPS, the Global Positioning System. That's the US constellation of satellites, and that was started in the 70s, and it didn't take long. I think the US kind of led it, but the then Soviet Union was hot on her tails in the middle of the Cold War, so they launched GLONASS, and then when the Soviet Union disbanded in around 1991, Russia took it over. So GLONASS today is run by the Russian. It's the Russian constellation. Europe came up with one called Galileo. China has one called Baidu. QZSS is Japan, Quasi-Zenith Satellite System, and IRNS is India. So there's a lot of satellites out there. And so what we're trying to do when we talk about tsunami or earthquake early warning is to, rather than have physical instruments in the ground that are detecting shaking like a seismometer, we're actually detecting the offsets of positions from a receiver that's very well monumented with good telemetry and processing that as quickly as we can, okay? So that's what GNSS is. And as time goes on, you've heard of GPS, your phone has it, but you're going to increasingly hear about GNSS because a modern smartphone, like a new iPhone, a new Android phone, they listen to a lot more than GPS. So you'll see GNSS. So don't forget that acronym because that's coming in. Now, as I get into it, I want to talk a little about where Hannah and Nick both asked me to talk about how I got into this stuff that we're doing. And so I want to talk about it because actually what we've built here is an outgrowth of kind of how it is I got to be on the 3rd floor of this building. And so a little history, and you'll see how we've really been surfing a technology wave this whole time. That's what I really want to show you. But I was a physics major as an undergrad, and at some point, climbing around and backpacking, I learned that you could actually earn a living by kind of doing physicsy sort of stuff on mountains that were fun to hike around on. And I thought, well, that's really cool. So when I graduated from college, I needed a job, and I started beating the bushes for a job. And I put a lot of time and energy into finding a job. I could code computers. I was very good at that time or I thought, at software. And I got 2 job offers, one from Unical, in the Imperial Valley of California. That's shorthand for money. And then I got a second job offer from the USGS Cascade Volcano Observatory, whose salary was 1/4 of what Unical was offering, but they were wearing flip-flops. And the Unical people were wearing coats and ties. And at 23 years old, I wasn't ready to wear a coat and tie to work. So USGS, here I came. And it was a great choice because as a software person, I thought I was just going up to the Cascade Volcano Observatory to code computers, but what they saw was fresh meat because St. Helens this is the picture here is that's the, it blew up in 1980 and then it kept generating these domes that it would blow up and rebuild and blow up and rebuild and eventually, but by 1986 it had turned off. It wasn't doing it. So that picture there shows the 1986 dome, but it needed to be surveyed, and believe it or not, you can, so I got to, that was immediately, I thought I'm there to write code and do stuff, but they said, no, you're going to take the heli safety class and you're going to get fitted for a Nomex flight suit and a helmet and you're going to start going into the crater of St. Helens. And you'd think it's really exotic, except believe it or not, it can get old. You're going in, you're flying in there every weekend or during weekday. It's gritty, it's dirty. Sometimes the chopper can't pick you up and you have to hike out. And so I was essentially fresh meat, like the goodness. So there was a lot of going in and setting up GPS receivers, and that's how I first learned what a GPS receiver. You go in, you set up a tripod. And fresh meat is fresh meat. I mean, it wasn't just St. Helens. They sent us all over the place. This is Augustine Volcano up in Alaska. Here's 23-year-old me setting up GPS receivers out there in really exotic places. And it was cool and it was fun, but there'd be times where you're gone for 3 months straight. So I did that job for about 2 years. It was a term appointment and all good things had to come to an end, right? And so it was time, and I thought, okay, this is cool. I'm going to do more of this. So I had applied to grad school, so it was off to graduate school in LA, and I remember driving over the Grapevine down I-5, dropping into the LA Basin in September, and I thought, I spent so many years here, what have I done? But it turned out it was a good move. Okay, so I got to grad school and went there to do seismology, but in grad school, where I went, they don't structure it like you don't have a 503 for those of you who are taking 503. You have this time where you have to kind of figure out what you're doing, and you have to kind of get teamed up with a professor and do a project or two, and that becomes the basis of a kick-out exam. And one of the projects was Joanne Stock was working on a continental dynamics project where, if I can get the mouse right here, this block here is known as the Jalisco block. And it's uplifting, and it's in the process of getting eaten or getting stolen by the Pacific Plate here, or the Riveras Plate, from North America. So this whole block here is uplifted by about 3 kilometers. And it will get transferred, just like Baja was transferred starting, I don't know, between 10 and roughly 3 million years ago, from the North American Plate to the Pacific Plate. And where'd my mouse go? Come back. Where's my mouse? Because Baja, California, the peninsula, it connects down to here, right? And so Jalisco was happening. So this was a continental dynamics project, and I needed an orals project to get not kicked out of school after a year. And so I said, I'll help you. And so down we went, and it's a classic continental rift zone down there where it's a 3-armed rift. You've got, this is one arm, this is Laguna Chapala near Guadalajara, and then the third arm of this continental rift is the Colima volcano is in here, and this whole block is on its way out. But I got in, started reading some geology papers, and the rates of rifting across these rifts is like 0.2 millimeters a year. And I knew very well that, because I had learned about GPS when I worked at the USGS. I was like, I don't want to be a grad student for 40 years until we can get a resolvable signal. So I told my advisor, like, I'll help you with the thing, but I'm not going to get, this is not a PhD. I'm not going to do this. And so we got to drive around. At that point, we had traded, we traded what was a $3 million Bell Jet Ranger helicopter for a beater rental car van. And we spent our time driving around Jalisco, Michoacan, Colima. And if you haven't been down there, I mean, Mexico is a shockingly beautiful country. I mean, it's just amazing. It was a real opportunity to go see these places I would have never gone to before. And it's and then the project ended, and as far as I was concerned, I was done. And then 7 months later, there was a magnitude 8 earthquake right underneath that network that we had helped build and for which we had made a measurement, okay, by driving around. By the way, that's not me. That's Chuck Demetz in that photo. It was a co-PI from the University of Wisconsin. But we went back down there, and what I want to show you, and I want to get the mouse right here, is we went out and we measured all these places, like this site here. This is Shamela, where Lisa Ely and Dan Beck used to run their field biology class. It's a dry land forest down there, but that thing moved 80 centimeters, okay? And a couple other of these stations moved 50, 60 centimeters, but and we could do a little, I've lost my mouse again, I'm sorry. And we could do a little math problem on this and say, okay, what is the distribution of slip that caused those offsets, given that we know where the fault is? And we saw about 5 meters of slip, okay, for the fault itself. But it took, what I want to point out is it took us 6 days to get the permits, to get the receivers, to get on a plane from LA and go down there and meet with the Mexican researchers at UNAM, at the National University. They were raring to go, but it just took a lot of time. And right then I realized, God, you know, it'd be really nice if you could just get the measurements like you get seismic measurements, just in real time. It wouldn't take 6 days, right? We lost 6 days of data. And what was interesting is when we went there and got there on day 6, you can see the station wasn't done moving. It kept moving. And that's not what we learn, that's not what we teach in intro geology, where you have an earthquake and everything shakes and then, you know, the fence is off post. In this case, the fence just kept moving, and what we would learn is that slip propagated down dip from where the actual earthquake was. Okay, I'm struggling with the mouse here. Slip, that was where the earthquake was, but it stresses everything down dip, which is warm, and it kept creeping, and we could map that out over time. And so, but it never, that was the first time I thought, wow, we really need real-time data for this, okay? Because what happened in that first 6 days, right? I mean, nobody knows. We didn't get there in time, and we didn't have continuous measurements. So anyways, we did work on that project, and it was fun to be able to go back down to Jalisco. This is a blue agave. I put this in here to remind me to tell you that this is there's a lot of blue agave grown in there, and there's a very famous drink that Jalisco owns the international trade name to. So there was an added component to doing this fieldwork. But anyways, that was my first published paper. Okay, the geodetic fingerprint or signature of the 1995 Jalisco published as a grad student with the colleagues down at UNAM. And then we also found another early paper was that the fault didn't stop sliding right after the earthquake. It continued to creep in different places for weeks. It actually went on for years. Okay, it was really interesting, but it turned into other students. But that project had to end, and I actually did go to grad school to do seismology, and so we published a bunch of papers, and I ended up switching to an advisor to actually do, you know, looking at wiggles seismology, and eventually that had to come to an end. All good things had come to an end. So it was time to find another job. I had done my penitence as far as I was concerned. I had spent 31 years in LA, and so I just wanted something else for the next 31 years. And so I thought, well, let's go back, let's look around. And at that time, around 1998, I had heard tell of a GPS network, a nascent, that had been started in the Northwest. Megan Miller and Charlie Rubin here. They gave Panga the name, the Pacific Northwest Geodetic Array. That's a pun. They were into windsurfing in Mexico, and Panga is a Mexican fishing boat. So if you never knew that pun, now you know it. They weren't the only ones. The Canadians, actually, north of the border, had put the first GPS receivers in. They had a bunch up there. University of Washington had, but it seemed like the epicenter was here, and they were offering me a job that wasn't in LA, so I was pretty stoked. So I came on up here, but I wanted to say, you know, even then, on the top here is a 1992 Trimble 4000 SSI, and this is the type of receivers we deployed in the crater of St. Helens, up in Alaska, in Jalisco. You put them down, you plug them in, they run data for a week, you come back and you get the data, download it to a laptop, go home and analyze it. But by 2004, that had turned into this lower receiver, which is, the name is a NetRS. That's the actual name of it. We still have a bunch of them. Who of you have taken my field geodesy class, the volcano geodesy? So you guys will recognize that receiver. Even the name network, NetRS, it's on the net. It's the internet. And you remember, the internet really happened between like 1992 and 2004. And so the whole mode of these GPS receivers, it wasn't this thing you go deploy, measure data, come get it, and then analyze it. Instead, the whole mode had changed. You put them in the ground, you set the height to nothing, and you don't touch them for years on end, and they just stream their data. And suddenly, I knew we can build a seismic network out of these. That was the basic thought that was persistent. And I wrote the very first proposal to NASA in 2006, and they funded it. I couldn't believe it. Somebody, I know who, actually I'll talk about him later, saw the vision that we can build, if we can do it with Panga, we can do it with the world. And if we can do it with the world, we can really help these nascent warning systems, okay? So this is a figure today. This is Panga. Rex put this together for an annual report. And the reason I want, this is the network that we operate here, but what I really want to focus on is the real-time. If you look at the mouse, where are you? Here it is. If you look at the circular shape, some of these stations have not one but 3 separate ways of getting their data from wherever they are to this building in real time. So the big yellow circles, that's a satellite, a dedicated satellite system. Some of you might have seen that huge satellite dish on the roof. That's streaming in the data from these 11 stations out on the coast. Other ones have cell modems, okay? And then others are plugged into the wall, like with an Ethernet jack that's on the back of the receiver. So some of these come in 3 different ways, and then it's up to Rex is the one who's driving all over hell and gone fixing these different telemetry systems or whatever as they get hit by lightning or hit by bullets or shorted out by seawater or whatever. And then Marcelo and Craig and Walter have designed the system where multiple data from paths from the same system can come in. Okay, so we have, Panga is now in 2025, I think it's 100% real-time network. Do we have, we probably have a couple that somebody has to go get data, but is that right, Rex? Yeah, there's always 1, 2. But it's essentially, we get data from this network and from anywhere in the world at the speed of light, which means it's 100th of a second delay from when it's acquired out on the coast of Washington to our network here. Okay, so why would we want to do this? Well, let me show you one thing. I'm going to show you one earthquake. This is the 2011 magnitude 9 Tohoku earthquake as recorded on the Japanese National Geodetic Array, just like ours. Okay? This is the year 2011. It's a very dense network. It's a multi-billion-dollar array. That's where the stations are. And notice the scale bar right here. This is plus or minus, this is 1 meter of offset following the earthquake. That's what happened following the earthquake. Okay? So things that were here, using this as a scale bar, some of these moved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 meters. Okay? So the ground really does deform that much in these big earthquakes. And I want to show you a video from my colleagues. They made the kind of the best version of this. If I hit play. This is my colleagues down at Caltech and JPL, part of the ARIA project, and this is now 10 years old. But what you're seeing here is a countdown. We're 5 minutes before the earthquake. This is the vertical motion. So this isn't real motion. This is probably tropospheric error being mapped in. And these are the horizontal motions. And just look at the color. The bright yellow color is a contour of 5 meters of display. Of deformation. Okay, so right there, boom, the earthquake has happened. Okay, and we are now 1 minute in, and you can start to see the deformation spread out, and you can see the Rayleigh waves and the sort of propagating across the islands of Japan. This is sped up by 20 times. But what you can see here, and I don't believe I have the mouse control. What I can't do, okay, I'll show you this, but what I wanted to point out is when this went from blue to yellow, it did it in about 90 seconds following the earthquake, the nucleation time of the earthquake. The earthquake fault itself was rupturing for at least 45 seconds. So there's a rupture time for the fault to get that much slip on it, right? And then that's got to propagate from the trench to the land where it's then picked up. So this becomes the point is a magnitude 9, the deformation was expressed by Mother Nature in terms of measurable ground deformation within 90 seconds. So if the GPS can capture that immediately, you can characterize this thing as a magnitude 9 earthquake in like 90 seconds, okay? And that becomes very important. All right, so let me go to the next one. And so I wanted to show you that because this becomes the basis of how GNSS can assist. It doesn't replace, but it can really enhance and speed up and make more accurate early warning systems, okay? And what this is, if you saw on the title slide, we had 3 grad students working on this, Jesse Senko, Catherine Jeffries, and Ben Norford, right? And I had them sicked on an algorithm of how we could use this to get at earthquake magnitude. But this is real research. They did 3 very good masters. But turns out a colleague of mine, Brendan Crowell, now at Ohio State University, he came up with a much better idea. And his idea, basically sprang from his head, was that if you plot the distance between a seismically located hypocenter and a GPS receiver, that's what's on this axis, and then how much did that GPS receiver, just how much did it move during the earthquake? You don't care whether it's a static offset like the proverbial offset fence post, or whether it's dynamic surface wave shaking, just how much did it move? And these receivers, we know where these things are to a fraction of a centimeter in a reference frame that we understand. So if you plot, and that's called PGD, peak ground displacement. And again, you don't care what kind it is, it's just how much did it move, okay? And you plot here, this is centimeters on a log scale. So this is 10 centimeters, that's 100 or a meter, that's 10 meters up there, and this is the distance. What you find is different scales of earthquakes fall on these lines. And this is Tohoku up here, that's the ones I just showed you. So if you're 200 kilometers away from the epicenter, the hypocenter source, and you move 5 meters, pull out that up here, that's in the magnitude 9. This constant line is magnitude 9, magnitude 8, magnitude 7. And so again, so this was his algorithm was just to simply regress this, come up with a regression curve, and then have a thing that picks the peak ground displacement and estimate the moment, okay? And this becomes important for earthquake early warning, which I'm about to get to. So if you look at this, for the 2011 Tohoku earthquake, these triangles, these are seismometer-based systems. So EPIC and Finder are 2 different algorithms, and then Japan has really all kinds of algorithms. But what you find is that these things failed, they saturated, they didn't get to the magnitude of the earthquake in the time that they needed to. And that's not the fault of the Japanese network, or Lord knows it's not the fault of the Japanese scientists, who are second to none. I mean, it's just the physics of the problem is really hard with a local seismic network to do that right. It may never happen in our lifetime. AI might change things, but it's a very hard problem. But if you look at the GPS, this PGD algorithm, it basically starts to get into the high magnitude 8s within about 90 seconds. Okay? Just because it's only looking at how much did the stupid GPS receivers move. It's not trying to locate earthquakes and do any of that. So it's a very blunt, a very coarse tool, but when earthquakes get really big, blunt is good, okay? So, and I should add, if you're not familiar with the magnitude scale, that used to be called the Richter scale, it's a factor of 30 in energy between like a magnitude 7 or a magnitude 8, and it's a factor of 30 of energy between a magnitude 8 and a magnitude 9. So if your seismic network estimates an earthquake to be a magnitude 8, and then you run all your models and you get a 2-meter run-up of a tsunami, but turns out you got it wrong and it was actually a 9. If you let everything else be linear, factor of 30 difference, what should have been a 2-meter run-up of a tsunami is a 50, 60-meter run-up, right? So you got to get the magnitude right. Okay, so this brings me to Shake Alert, which is the U.S. Earthquake Early Warning Program. It's run by the USGS. There's a gazillion partners that they do. It is operational. It's started as a seismic network, but using the GNSS positions went live last year. And that fact that it went live has cost me and Marcelo and Craig and Walter and Rex quite a few probably lost nights of sleep if you think it through, okay? Because, I'll explain why. So what is earthquake early warning? Well, the first thing to know is earthquake early warning is not prediction, okay? When you have a seismic network out everywhere and you have a fault that ruptures, say down here, I'm gonna use my hand because I can't drive that. Okay, you have some fault rupture here. It starts throwing out seismic waves, and if you've blanketed the landscape with seismometers, you can detect that very quickly. And if you can analyze it really quickly and figure out how big it is, then you can decide, well, this thing, we know how big this is, and we can run our models, we know how big ground shaking is going to be over how broad an area, and you can figure that out real quick, and then telemeter that out to vulnerable populations, right? And they can take cover. And if you do it right, you can get many seconds. You're not going to get minutes or hours, but you can get many seconds ahead of the arrival of strong ground motion shaking. And it allows certain things to happen. But the key concept is you got to accurately you got to pin down what the magnitude is accurately, because that determines how broad an area you're going to warn. And humans don't like to be given false warnings. We tend to tune, if you're given 3 or 4 false warnings, you will start to tune out those warnings when you shouldn't, okay? So this is Shake Alert, and it's primarily a seismometer-based system, as it should be, because most of the earthquakes are not ginormous earthquakes. They're 6s and 7s, right? And they can do things. And you might say, well, what does 5 seconds of warning get you? You know, if we got all our alarms went off right now, yeah, you could crawl, drop cover and hold on. But so there's a lot of that. But the real benefit, I think, personally, and this is my own personal opinion, I'm not sure people inside the USGS would agree with this, but I think the real benefits here is societal systems. And I want to just point out, here's one of many systems. So the 1906 earthquake in the San Andreas, right, it torched San Francisco because it caused so many fires. Yes, there was a lot of shaking damage, but it was the fires that really took out. And so in California today, all those, I don't know if it's statewide law, but they're all being upgraded. The valves, the gas valves that connect your house to the gas system are on the internet. And they can go, so a bad earthquake starts on, say, the Newport-Inglewood Fault, right through downtown LA, the LA basin, 25 million people. The earthquake starts, and all across the land, click, 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 click. All the gas valves turn off, right? If you stop a fire, or 10,000 fires, Shake Alert has paid for itself 100 million times over, right? I mean, the damage estimates coming out of the Altadena fire are gobsmacking. But there's many other systems. I'd say there's thousands of industrial systems that can benefit from 3 seconds of warning. The ones I've heard the most are they talk about it allows the surgeon to pull his scalpel out of, or her scalpel out of your gut while they're operating on you. I mean, I've literally heard that put out there, but you get the idea, right? So Shake Alert, we're the analysis center for Shake Alert, right? So what happens is data comes from this 1,036 stations, comes up to CWU here, into the building next door. We position these stations every second, and then we send our estimates of the positions to 3 kind of Shake Alert centers, one at University of Washington here in Seattle, the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network, one at UC Berkeley at the Berkeley Seismic Network, and then one at Caltech at the Caltech Seismological Lab. So we're doing all that positioning round the clock. And this is the system that we collectively, and like I said, a long time ago, I thought I knew about computers. But if have any of you been into the server room over here where all this stuff goes on? So some of you have. That's the system that Walter and Craig and Marcelo have put together. And basically, there's networks that we listen to. We bring in all kinds of corrections from orbits and clocks. There's services out there like the International GNSS service where if you're going to position stuff ideally at a centimeter level, you got to know where those satellites are very accurately, as well as what the clocks on board are doing. You do all this stuff, and you position it, and then you send it off. And Craig has designed these systems where industrial clients can hook in and they just stream into the systems. That's how it gets to Shake Alert. There's web interfaces where you can go out and see these things bouncing around. And I wanted to say this is a work in progress. It's never done. This is an assessment of how we were doing from 1,300 stations from 5 years ago. And what you really care about is how fast this is how fast the data arrives to CWU, and that's 1 second, 2 seconds. See, most is coming in between a half a second Takes almost nothing. That's measured in hundreds of seconds at the top middle. But the key thing is here on the top right, that completeness, essentially within 1 second, we've gotten a high 90-something% of all the data coming in from 1,000 stations, right? And then on this one, we know where these stations are to a millimeter accuracy. How are we doing in real time? We know where they are in a reference frame at millimeter level based on, in some cases, 20 years of continuous measurements. But when you're positioning it in real time, second by second, how well do we do? And we don't do perfectly. Ideally, these would be just a spike right at 0, but that means we would nail it persistently. But there's too much going on planet Earth. There's atmospheres, there's Earth wobble, there's ionospheres, there's all kinds of system things. But what I wanted to show you was that's from 2020. If you look at the same plots as Walter put these together in 2023, you can see we're getting faster and both the data is coming in faster, meaning our processing is processing it faster, and we can turn it around. Okay, and if you look at the accuracy, it used to be that, and now it's that. It used to be that. So we're constantly working on these algorithms to make them better. Okay, so I don't have time to show you this, but this is a QR code. If you scan it, or you just go to the penga.org website and click on the GPS cockpit, you can see all these stations moving around, right? So it's a live system, and we feed the data out there. And I want to talk about, before I talk about the tsunami issue, I want to just talk one more added benefit to how GNSS can help constrain very quickly the magnitude of the earthquake, which again controls the area of warning. And the main concept I want to get across is that earthquakes, when they get big, they start to do very strange things, okay? And when we teach about seismology, we talk about a fault in the ground, it slips, you get a P wave, you get an S wave. The most pathological example I know of earthquakes doing complicated things is highly analogous to where the Cascadia subduction zone meets the San Andreas Fault. And it happened in 2016 I think it was 2016, I think it was 2016, in Kaikoura. It's called the Kaikoura, New Zealand earthquake. And this is an earthquake that started on land. The rupture itself jumped over 20 named faults. So now think of slip as happening, and it's jumping from fault to fault to fault to fault to fault. Some of those faults were strike slip motions, some of those faults were dip slip motions, some of those faults were thrust motion. What does it even mean to locate and characterize an earthquake like that that's jumping 20 named faults, right? So again, this is where the GNSS is very useful because you wouldn't know. I should add there was a huge, some of the dip slip motion produced, deformed the ocean bottom, and it produced local run-ups of up to 15 feet. In New Zealand, okay? And so this is where the seismic networks trying to ascribe slip to faults and putting a focal mechanism and all the stuff we normally do in seismology, it just doesn't capture what's going on. And actually a very blunt tool, like just how big was it? GNSS can help you in a way that the seismic networks really struggle with for a local earthquake. Now the seismic networks get there, but they typically wait to get teleseismic recordings, okay? So here's just an example. This is the Leader Fault, but I've heard it called the Great Wall of New Zealand, right? And again, if you look at where this thing falls, it ends up falling right here in the middle of kind of on this. So this could have been constrained, but New Zealand wasn't doing that with their GNSS data at that time. This is all pretty bleeding edge. Here's an example of some of the coastal uplifts that produced the tsunami. So going back to our system here, we've captured, Walter put this together, close to 20 earthquakes globally. There's probably more now. But he also scraped, and I want to make this play. And this is the Ridgecrest earthquake coming in during a Dodgers-Padre game in LA.
Not want to be sitting one of the first rows of the upper deck. I guess we kind of are. 6.4 magnitude the other day. How are they continuing to play baseball? I don't understand how the
I can't believe they kept playing with all the shaking.
Are that was a 7.1 magnitude earthquake. Wow.
Okay, so these things do happen, and I want to show you this earthquake because this is the This is the one, this is what we actually caught this earthquake with our routine processing, and we have these filters that can click on stuff. And if you look at the blue arrows, so these arrows show, these vectors show how the system, the blue one is the best we can do weeks later, looking at all the data before and after. But these other arrows here, the whatever color that is, that's what we knew within 25 seconds of the origin time of the earthquake. Okay, so they're not perfect, but they're not bad. Okay, Marcello's algorithm is really good. And if you look at how the time series, the blue dot here is the origin time. That's right when the fault is estimated to have started based on first motions of nearby seismometers. You can see the stations, the GNSS stations really start moving. And this is 20 seconds for scale. Origin time, 20 seconds, 40 seconds, 80 seconds. So you can see most of the offsets they happen within 20 seconds of origin time, right? And so here's what the time series, if you zoom way in, you can see actually how much they offset. And if we go back to this estimate from Brendan Crowell using this GFAST PGD algorithm, you can see that he published, I think it was within 14 seconds of origin time, the PGD algorithm had pinned this thing as a 6.9. And a 6.9 said, when you do the math on that, says warn LA, okay? But it turns out the seismic networks, the seismic network for this particular event underestimated. And my understanding is what happened was the waveforms got very busy and the compression algorithms on some of the digitizers basically bogged down. And so what ended up happening was the seismic networks didn't get seismic data from the closest stations in a timely fashion. And so what ended up happening was the magnitude, it just saturated at about 6.5. But at that level, there was no warning to LA given. Okay, and this is not a criticism of the seismic. It's a very hard problem that's got a lot of really, really talented people working on it. But you can see these rings, if you assume this is the origin time and ask where the strong ground motion coming out, how does it move? This is where you are at 14 seconds. So you can warn everybody outside of here after 14 seconds. And even our Kalman filters that triggered at 25 seconds, you still kind of get LA. And as it turns out, I was in LA for this earthquake. And I was walking along with my older son's friend, who has at that time you would call it a real Twitter problem, and he was like, hey, there's been a big earthquake. And he got it through Twitter within about 90 seconds. So that's a whole new way of possibly locating earthquakes, right? But in any case, this is, in our analysis system, these are the stations that we have processed, that we know exist, okay? New Zealand shares their data, Australia shares their data. That we know, and there's about 2,000, just over 2,000 in our system. But what I want to show you, this is the vision. This is what we know is out there. And if we could get our hands on these data, and not all these are real-time telemetry, but most of them are not shared, you'd be very hard-pressed. You'd be very hard-pressed indeed to hide any significant earthquake from this type of measurement. The main issue is the money. It's money in politics, and that's not a criticism when I say it's just like take the Japanese array. There's 5,000 stations in Japan. That's multi-billions of dollars, and to fund it, Japan Parliament said we're going to sell the data, okay? And because they got to pay for it, and so but we got to get a way to. All right, I'm running behind. So what I want to talk about, I'm just going to run through the obviously, if we can nail most big subduction zone earthquakes where we have GNSS covers, then we can really help the tsunami problem. And there exists, my class just an hour and a half ago, we had the associate director of the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center come online. Raise your hand if you were in that class. Yeah, so we got to hear him talk about it, and he gave a very nice description of how they do their thing. But basically, if you're the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, you warn on seismic and you cancel on tide gauges, okay? So what does that mean? It means they bring in 3 types of data right now. The global seismic network, okay? But if a bad earthquake happens in Papua New Guinea, the seismic waves have to get out around the world to be accurately characterized if there's not a very good local seismic network there in Papua New Guinea, and that's the case for most of the world. So you're looking at roughly a 15-minute delay for that, okay? They have these dart buoys, but there's only 39 of them. They measure the wave itself, okay? But there's only 39 that Congress funds, plus another dozen or so that other nations. So you don't have a lot of them. And then there's the global tide gauge network, but they don't want to wait till the wave hits the tide gauge to be able to accurately characterize a tsunami. So the GNSS provides a fourth way that's global in scope. And again, I want you to look at all of those stations. And the system that Craig and Marcelo and Walter and Rex have put together, it's linearly scalable. Like if we could get 10,000 stations, I suspect with some stuff that Craig and Walt, those guys would do, we could position 10,000 stations in real time and get them to the world. But we can't get the data open because some nations just don't share their data, which is really for national security reasons, which is nuts because we know where their pixels are. We don't need, I mean, we being the people that are inside the United States that they're scared of, know where their pixels are, right? So there's no reason, but we can't, we've tried, I've been beating my head against this for a long time, trying to get these data sets opened, and it's not really working for a whole bunch of reasons. So we may end up being limited to just the few countries that do, but we position stuff for people. We position New Zealand's data and send them the answer. We do it for Ecuador, we do it for Chile, we do it for a bunch of places. But as kind of a new way to try to go about it, we have started this thing called the G2 stands for GNSS-enhanced Tsunami Early Warning System to create a sort of a pilot project for Oceania that we would then expand around Oceania. And if we can show the world that we can do this in a life-saving situation, then maybe we can get the UN or other international agencies to start publishing stuff that says share this data because it will save potentially hundreds of thousands of lives in any given bad tsunami, right? And so I just wanted to show you this. Darcy, are you here? Darcy Snowden? Here, yeah, Darcy's back here. Here's Darcy Snowden for scale, measuring one of Tonga's tsunami deposits. So Tonga has a real tsunami problem, right? And that's taken right down in here. Okay, that's their subduction zone trench. We were booking for a hotel there, and the hotels that we wanted to go had just been taken out by the Hunga Tonga tsunami. So that's Rex checking his email on what used to be a ballroom floor of a nice resort on the north side. So Tonga is a very rich place for tsunamis, which means it's a really good place for us to go and try to build these systems out. And so we went down, we've done a bunch of trips down there. This is Onsala. We have some receivers that we can redeploy down there. We ran a class down there to kind of teach them what this is all about. They pulled a lot of strings very quickly. Here's us all on the roof of a building. That's Rex on the corner there with one of the Tongans there, drilling a hole, mounting a receiver, stringing cables through their buildings. Like the Americans show up and start stringing buildings. This is Rex breathing deeply of Chinese asbestos. But voila, we got it working, and so that's it built, and there it is. And in just a very short amount of time, oh, and we got the receiver program teaching them how to do it, and then voila, inside GPS cockpit, here's the vector showing up. And I just put these in this morning. This is this morning's data. In real time, this streams by. If you go to the website, you'll see it. Okay, so we're doing that, and we've got 4 down in Tonga. We have 1 more to go. We're hoping the Tongans will do that one because it's a very hard to island. And the idea here is then to use this as a seed crystal. We do have about 80 receivers we can give them that are available. And if we can get the rest of Oceania to play ball, which is hard because there's money and there's people's time involved, then we can do it. So I'm about to run out of time. What I wanted to do is, this is the talk that when Walter and I go all over the world giving these talks, this is the summary slide that I wanted to, you don't need to read this. It's basically, the system works. It's been tested. It's a whole new way of characterizing earthquakes when they get very complicated or when they're offshore, and you can measure the on-land deformation, and it's a service, and we need to try to figure out how to get the world to share its data. So when I'm in Japan, or I'm in New Zealand, or I'm in France, or I'm in Tonga, I'm like, build your system, but share the data. We won't sell it. We won't sell it. And that's the big worry, because this data costs money. And, but for saving lives, we can do it. So that's the talk. That's the summary I would give to the rest of the world. To this community, What I wanted to say is thank you to CWU. They've been this department, the university has been incredibly supportive. It's been 2.5 decades, and we've been working on this for, like I said, almost 20 years. And this is my last, this is the last time I taught fourth year. Are any of you in this picture in this room this time? Yeah, a few of you are. So this class, this is using recycled Panga gear. We go down to South Sister Volcano and we deploy these things. And so thank you to everybody and to CWU. All right.
Thank you, Tim. We have time for a few questions. Please raise your hand. Tim will call on you, and Tim will repeat your question for the home audience so that they can hear it as well. And if you have to slip out, I understand, but please do it quietly. Questions?
I was just wondering, your system, it's kind of a controversy about it, does it filter out background noise? Talking about crustal tides and things like that?
Yes. The question is, does it filter out background noise? Yes, that's what we would say is we have models for things like solid earth tides, for what the atmosphere is doing, what the ionosphere is doing. Those models are pretty good, and those models are subtracted from the observations because we tend not to care about that stuff. Although I should say there's a huge effort led by the Jet Propulsion Lab to use some of those models, like when you have a bad tsunami, it perturbs the ionosphere, and they can detect that. So JPL and NASA have funded a big process, and that's very important for the tsunami warning people because that allows them to measure the wave as it's propagating across the oceans. So yeah, there's more models in this than you can imagine. Yeah.
You focused on time from event on. Is there any way to characterize micro events time minus to gain a little bit of time if you have a big event?
Yeah, you are dangerously close to the multi-millennial allure of earthquake prediction. In this case, foreshocks.
What's the question, Tim?
Sorry, the question is there stuff going on, I talk about origin time, is there stuff going on before the earthquake that we could look at? That's the holy grail of seismology, right? Learn how to predict earthquakes. I will tell you in my own opinion, it's also been for hundreds of years a magnet for really irreproducible research. So the short answer is no. The best experiments ever done, like the Parkfield earthquake, when we really got in there, there's very few precursors. That's not to say some earthquakes don't have precursors. 5% of earthquakes are followed by bigger earthquakes, makes them foreshocks. So there are earthquakes that have precursors, but there's no identifiable pattern that you could use to say, oh, that's a precursor.
Is that a place for AI?
Probably not. Mother Nature is just too fickle. That's my own guess. Happy to be proven wrong. Yeah.
When you're doing the equation that uses distance and the amount of motion, does the amount of motion account for the substrate that is happening within?
Yes, it does. So the question is, when we're using the GFAST PGD algorithm, the total motion, what we're actually measuring is the motion of the electromagnetic phase center of the antenna, but these are bonded very, very well to the dirt that they're in. And if we can afford it, we drill deep holes 20 feet down and grout them in with Invar steel, right? So yes, so the extent that the substrate is moving, that's what we're capturing. They're not on roller skates or anything. Yeah.
Okay, if you still have a question or two, come on up and chat with Tim one-on-one. We'll see you next Friday. Thank you for coming.
All righty. Sorry, I went long.
You're a pro.
Oh, good.
That was really wonderful.
Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah, let me get this hard.
Bring it all down.
I know, that's right. It's great, Jim. Thank you.
You?
Hey, Steve.
When's a good? I got a couple items for you. When's a good time to get you in your office? I noticed you don't have the little chart on when you're going to be
Oh,
there.
yeah. I need to go back to the live crowd right now. Monday morning?
Monday morning? Could do that.
Let's do 10 o'clock Monday morning.
10 o'clock Monday morning? Sounds good.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Hi, Sasha. Okay, everybody. Well, thank you for joining us today.
But they're, I mean, they're not better than us. I just didn't read it full. Earthquakes are what for us.
You think I was paying attention? I was reading this thing.
See, that's what I thought. All in one.
Pretty rusty with the equipment, but I thought that was a great talk. I hope that you enjoyed it. I think I'm just going to sign off right now. I've got both mics on. Let me turn one off. That's an aspect to our department here in Ellensburg that is maybe a surprise to you. We should have more involved with the geodetic array upstairs to be giving talks, because there's a lot of cool stuff going on for sure. Appreciate you joining us today. We will see you next Friday if you want to keep going with this Noon Talk series. Chris Mattinson, who's been more and more involved in the Cascades A to Z, will be our speaker. I don't think he's talking about the Cascades next Friday, but put that on your calendar. Next Friday, January 31st at noon Pacific. That'd be wonderful. And then some of you may not be aware that we have a live stream series going on right now, and I'll see many of you tomorrow morning, Saturday morning, 8 a.m. Pacific time on Saturday, January 25th, 2025. We'll look for you then. I promise to change my shirt by then. Okay? Thank you. Thank you. I love you, and goodbye.
Flash drive. Oh. If you want. Just run it back up to your office.
There goes the speaker. Goodbye. See you.